Hi, I'm John F. Allen. And I'm R.J.Sullivan. And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, Tower 1, John F. Allen.
And I'm Tower 2, R.J. Sullivan.
Today we will be discussing and reviewing Extraction. This film starring Chris Hemsworth, who you may know as Thor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and is directed by Sam Hargrove, who is a stuntman and has done a lot of stunt work for the MCU films. And this film is also produced by none other than the Russo brothers, who are famous for the Avengers films, the Infinity War, and Endgame. They also, Joe Russo of the Russo brothers has a writing credit for this film as well. And just so you would know, we've got Chris Hemsworth as Tyler Rake. We've got Byron and Ryder Larum as Rake's son. We've got Rude Hakrush Jaswal as Ovi Mahajan. And we've got David Harbour as Gasper. And we also have a cameo by the director, Sam Hargrave, as one of Tyler Rake's fellow squad members. So just off the bat, things you should know. This is a feature film directorial debut for Sam Hargrave. This film was intended for theaters, but due to the COVID-19, it was debuted on Netflix on April 24th. So let me go ahead and give you a little synopsis for the film. Tyler Rake is a brave black market mercenary who is hired to extract the kidnapped son of a ruthless crime lord from his captor, an up-and-coming drug lord who looks to leverage the boy for his father's territories and business. This isn't some extraordinarily different plot than other action films have had in the past. But I think that the thing that separates this from other films is the way it was written, the actors involved, and how the story moves from beginning to end. It also has a lot of heart in it, in my opinion, with regards to the characters, character development, the characters you need to know about, at least the primary characters. And the secondary characters actually have a little bit of depth to them in the situation. So we'll get into that. Just an early thing. We'll be going straight through the film. So when we get towards the end where it becomes spoiler territory, we'll let you know. But generally speaking, up until that point, you should be good to go if you haven't seen the film. But I do want to say right off the bat that I personally feel that you should go out and log on to Netflix and check this film out. All right, so let's get started. You want to start off, RJ, with your thoughts overall, and then we can dive into the film.
Yeah, so let's see. I'm going to start off by saying that I am sort of separated from action films of recent years. It's not something I'm as up on. So this was John's recommendation, and it being on Netflix and having Chris Hemsworth, I was like, sure, let's give it a try. My thing about action movies is that I will put other genres ahead of them, so I rarely actually get to them, I guess is a good way to put it. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to spend movie theater money, I'm going for the big spectacle, and then when I get to rentals, I'll go with the spectacle I missed. So action films generally just get kind of shoved toward the back. That's just my personal experience. So this was I think when we tried to track it, I said I've seen the Mission Impossibles up to number 3. And I really enjoyed Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill. So just to give you an idea, that's how far back I'm going with action movies. I obviously was a teenager during the Stallone and Schwarzenegger era, and those kinds of action films, which are very different. I'm looking forward to that discussion. But taking this film, having not seen any in a while, the violence level has certainly gone up considerably since the last time I've checked out one of these. Some of the violence to children is quite shocking, I should say. For those that aren't as acclimated to action films, if violence to children is one of your triggers, you might want to think twice before checking this out, because there were some moments that I found jaw-dropping. Now, children play a very important role in this movie overall, specifically Rake's response to children, how his child affected his past, and how saving this child is affecting him now. And one of my favorite moments in the film has to do with their encounter with a group of children in the midst of all the action and how he responds to that. So I love the way all that tied in. However, this is about gangsters. This is about ruthless people, and there's some ruthless stuff in this film for sure, for those that aren't used to that sort of thing. So that took a little acclimating for me, but once I got with it, I was on board. I thoroughly enjoyed it and found it a lot of fun.
As did I. I'm more acclimated to action films than RJ, as he alluded to. So just to give you a little background on myself, where action films come into play, I never really stopped watching them, although I felt that the quality of them for a while, after the ones that RJ mentioned, the Kill Bills and the Mission Impossibles, it kind of went downhill. But they've had a slow and steady increase in production value for me, not only with the acting and the plotting of them, but also with the quality of the writing. A lot of the 80s and 70s action, 70s, 80s, early 90s action films were you take your brain out, you put it on a shelf, and then you just eat popcorn and watch the explosions. And for what that's worth, I enjoyed those films like that, because I was getting what I was expecting. But a lot of the newer action films are more well scripted. They try to bring about a plot that is a lot deeper for the viewer. And sometimes it works and sometimes it does not. But it's something that's more commonplace now than it was in a lot of the other films of the past. I remember watching a lot of the action films from Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Bronson and Eastwood and all of those guys. And it was pretty much, tough guy. I'm going to go out here and go on a mission to do this, that, and the other, or someone's bringing out, the worst in me and I've got to defend myself and that kind of thing. So, they were pretty simple, pretty basic, but a lot of the plots in some of the newer action films are a lot more intricate and a lot more detailed, nuanced, and a little bit better thought out in some of them. So that is one of the things that I look forward to when I'm looking at an action film. Plus, now that we've been out of the Cold War for about, almost going on 30 years now, it's like we're looking at things through a different lens. And sometimes these films are even going back to that era when action films were in their heyday, because action films and espionage films were built around the Cold War. I mean, it was right there in your face in your day-to-day living. So that was the experience of the time when RJ and I were coming up, that we got to live through all of that. And now that stuff is now the past, a lot of the newer generation stuff is hearkening back to either making it a period piece during the Cold War or having it be something that's tied to some type of ramification or whatnot from the Cold War. So the Cold War still plays heavily in a lot of the themes in a lot of modern action films in one way or another, along with, of course, drug cartels and other things like that, you know. So, but yeah, I enjoyed this film. Again, I will say, I think that of the action films as of late, outside of the John Wicks and the Hobbs and Shaw films, I think this one is one of the better ones. And I was glad to see Chris Hemsworth in the starring role. I followed his career from his brief moments in the revised Star Trek film, which RJ is not the biggest fan of, but
he was fine.
I think that we agree that he was one of the strong points in the film.
Yeah,
and he was only on screen for less than 5 minutes.
Yep.
But I mean, he made an impact, and that was something that led me to be cheering when he was cast for the role of Thor in the MCU films, because I knew that he could carry it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone else could have pulled off this role quite the same way. I saw in a report some alternate casting, and I don't think any of them would have worked nearly as well as Chris Hemsworth does. He looks like the world-weary, experienced soldier who's still young enough to do what he needs to do, but also has seen a lot of action. He's pretty much a G.I. Joe, pretty much taken out of the box and ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've not seen the John Wicks, and I've not seen a lot of these more recent ones. The biggest thing I noticed, I'd like to get a comment from you, John, because you are more up on this, but when Schwarzenegger or Stallone or any of them go on a rampage, or even I'd say even like the Escape from New York's, I mean, nothing touches those guys. You know, they would go out there, and those folks were pretty much invincible. And if they got shot, it was maybe like one bullet in the arm or one bullet in the leg, which had them limping a bit. But for the most part, they were unscathed through the adventure. And it was kind of like they could take down 150 guys and you know, had this Superman quality to them where, you know, if someone did get captured and tortured like in Rambo, it was a shocking moment of the film, you know. Right. In here, Rake gets hit and shot and stabbed, and, you know, there was a certain invulnerability in the sense as to how much he had to endure,
right,
versus, you know, there, if you're expecting someone to just kind of like dodge everything and make a few quips, you're not going to get that here at all. This is about as opposite of that as you can get. It's kind of like how much abuse can a guy take and still keep going, which is a very different way of approaching it.
And how much of that is sheer willpower or sense of purpose, because most people, even some tough guys that we know, would have been like, to hell with this, I'm out. I'm kid, you're on your own. I mean, you know, and that gives you a depth of feeling for the character. And let me go to some of the talking points or plot points that we have here. Rake, who is Chris Hemsworth's character, Tyler Rake, he is a broken man, and he's a broken man because in his personal life, he lost his young son, to cancer. And this has created a void in his life, which has fueled his relentlessness and gives him a cavalier, he has nothing left to lose type attitude towards life. So when he's getting these missions for his mercenary missions, it's like, he'll go on a suicide run because, I mean, if he dies, so what? I mean, the light in him has been snuffed out with the death of his son. This particular mission, though, involves the extraction of a young boy older than his son at the time of his son's death, but I'd say early high school, middle school age kid. You know, his father's an imprisoned crime lord, and he is kidnapped by a rival crime lord who is looking to take over his father's territory, and he is held hostage in hopes that the imprisoned crime lord, the boy's father, will concede his territories to this person. And the mission is for Rake to extract and rescue the kidnapped child. And he takes this mission, even though he knows it's like being dropped into a hornet's nest, not just because of the fact that he's good at what he does, but because there's a child involved. And this basically awakens something in him, the sense of purpose. You know, I got to get this kid. You know, once he meets the child and he actually starts to extract him and they're going on the run, there's a connection that this child and he have that is palatable. When you're watching the film, you see it. And I credit to the actors because they had that chemistry. You actually believed in them and what they were doing with regards to their roles.
Yeah, I don't want to say this is a deep movie. It's not. You can kind of see where it's going and how to connect the dots. But where it needed to have the humanity, it was just enough so that it was believable.
Right.
You know, we knew the type of character that Rake was. We know that he's got nothing to lose, and they provide just enough so that you believe he connects with the boy. You believe that he's found his humanity and that he's found a new purpose.
Right.
And they need a whole lot of it, but they have just enough so that it kept me invested, and it got me caring. There's a bleakness to this mission that they dwell upon a bit, which basically they make it out like there's no happy ending for this boy. Why are you fighting so hard for him? Because someone's going to take him out sooner or later, which is also a bit different from the, you know, the basic optimism I remember from the older films I used to watch. You always felt like, okay, we get through this moment and everything has a chance to kind of turn around.
Right.
And yet it's almost like Rake says, oh, yeah, well, challenge accepted. We're going to try and change this boy's fate. And I think that added a lot to the stakes involved, which took things through to the end, which I don't want to get too far into that. But I'd like to talk about some of the directorial choices that were made, especially since this was a first feature film by the director. I was really struck by the fact that this is clearly a Hollywood production, you know, made for Americans, not necessarily made in America, and yet it takes place in India with local gangsters and local police who are all speaking the native language whenever they're talking. And it's kind of like, hey, Hollywood audience, you're reading subtitles for a while. Just deal with it, because this is the more realistic choice. You know, this is what would happen. And I thought that was the more interesting choice. I never really questioned it. But then I thought about it afterwards, and it's like, so how many movies have we seen where all of a sudden people just start talking English because that's what would be more convenient to the people watching it at the time? So I thought that was an admirable choice. And of course, the local actors that they tapped to play all the roles, whether they were good, bad, or somewhere in the middle, it seemed they cast for authenticity. There was none of the whitewashing that most people will complain about in so many instances. And we pretty much had only one American actor in the whole dang thing that I can think of who shows up for a brief time, and that's pretty much it. Everybody else cast true to who they are as far as where they come from and their region and the language they speak. Which,
Right.
yeah,
Right. And I don't think, and just to say this, Chris Hemsworth is not American. He's Australian.
sure.
And the character, from what I gathered, is not American. He's Australian as well.
Yeah.
So that in and of
I took
itself,
that to be true.
right. So that in and of itself speaks to the fact that while this is an American film or American-made film, it's not an American film in the sense that some of your Schwarzenegger and your Stallones and your Eastwood films of the past were. It's more of an international film that happens to have an American production. And that in and of itself makes it good. And I wasn't trying to, and I don't want any of our audience to think that I was alluding to the fact that this was like some really deep film. But when you compare it to some of the other films in the past, like let's take Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No,
this film is definitely deeper than that. It's not nearly as cheesy. I loved Commando. I still do. I mean, I take all the cheese that it is, but this is a more serious film in the action vein. And it was like the way that it was put together, you could tell that the story was driven to the point and written to the point where that was an intention of the Russo brothers when they were putting this together, and it shows through in Hargrave's directorial debut with regards to this film. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about was going into the plot points of the film. So as Rake is trying to extract the boy from the clutches of the rival drug lord, the boy's father's henchman, who is his like right-hand man, top lieutenant, the boy's father says, if you don't get my son back, I'm gonna kill your son and slaughter your family. And the henchman knew that he was serious, but the henchman also knew that he wanted to get out of that life because he didn't trust his boss and he didn't trust getting the boy back. So what he did was he took the money from the boss and hired Chris Hemsworth's character Rake to extract him and paid him a certain percentage of the money up front, and the other was going to be given to him upon completion. Well, he had concocted a scheme. The henchman had concocted a scheme with his wife to protect their son and their family, so that basically he was going to go on the mission himself, follow Rake, and basically take Rake out once he had extracted the boy, so that he could take the remainder of the bounty for himself and keep it, save the boy, and then run off with his wife, never to be heard from again, because he feared his boss and he wanted to get away from that life. So you kind of sympathize with that character a lot in trying to protect his family, and that he had a purpose. Although killing Rake, you're trying to kill the hero, even though the purpose for it may be somewhat noble. You're still trying to kill the hero, so that makes you, a villain, but it's a sympathetic villain. So you get where that guy is coming from, and having sympathetic villains instead of mustache twirling, despots is the way to go action films. And as you've noticed, even with the spectacle films, but even the smaller productions, that's the general direction that writers and directors are going with their villains, which makes for a stronger movie overall, I think.
Yeah. When the two are confronting each other on the street, you don't know how you're supposed to feel about that, because that you're rooting for Rake, but you know more about this guy than you generally know about the person who is confronting the quote quote protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're like, oh, I don't really want to see anything happen to this guy because I know about his kid and I know about his wife, but there's no way for this to end well, and so it creates kind of an emotional tug of war, even when you're just watching a bunch of action,
Right.
It makes you a little more engaged. Now,
right.
I'd like to talk about the filming of the action, specifically, I don't know, maybe an 11 or 12 minute sequence, which seems very purposefully set up. And the rest of the movie, again, taking out superheroes and taking out things where action, I've mentioned James Bond, which I don't think this really falls into the same thing. I've not seen this kind of action filmed before, and I'm not familiar with John Wick, so maybe you can speak to that. I've watched The Punisher on Netflix, I think would be what I would find this comparable to, but I've never seen I don't want to say video game type action like this because I think that trivializes it. I think it's much stronger than that. But this relentlessness of violence, but it's not quick cut. It's very well filmed.
Mm-hmm.
You could easily follow all the different action beats, and then in the middle of all that, to set up that long sequence which is meant to look like one shot but isn't. They use a little CGI to kind of do some trickery so that it looks like this 12-minute uninterrupted action part. But it's not, because there's no way they could have done some of it. And I thought it was an interesting choice, because we go into the car and out of the car and out the other side and then zoom up to the top of the building. But it's still, to the eye, it's fluid. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen anything like that before, where, I mean, we've all seen the Martin Scorsese tracking shot. We're all familiar with that kind of film gymnastics and how cool that kind of is. But to set up something that looks like that but really isn't, and to take it to that next level where, there's no way we actually did this, but we're going to make it look like we did. Mm-hmm. So I don't know about similar action movies, if that's unique to this film or not. What do you think, John?
Well, it's not as unique as you would think, because you're not acclimated to a lot of the modern action films. It's something that is becoming more and more of a thing with action films of the past, I'd say 15 to 20 years, slowly up until the point now where a lot of them are shot that way. It's something that I think is a plus for the movies, because it's a way in which you are fully engaged. You are not missing a beat from moment to moment. It's very fluid, as you said. It's like, you're, and you can trivialize the filming style when you're comparing it to video games with some people, but for any of our viewers who are as big geeks as we are, which I'm sure most of them are, they have probably played Call of Duty Modern Warfare or some of the other games of that nature. And that when you're playing those types of games, how that moves, how the game moves, how you move. It's very similar to that. And I think that is purposefully done, because you're dealing with a new generation of viewers who actually grew up playing those games, and that's how they process those types of scenes. And this is something that's very akin to them, so they're putting that style of filming into the action film so that those gamers or people who are familiar with that style of movement and fluidity are going to be able to relate. Because if you were to try and put a film like from our era when we were coming up, and those fight sequences like that, they would get bored. I'm pretty sure they would be like yawning, like, this sucks, and we're just not engaged in it. And that being said, this style of filming engages its audience in a way in which they can relate, especially younger audience members or viewers who that's what they're used to. We've seen both sides of this, so we can see the progression from one style to the next. This is all they've seen, and this is what they're used to. And I think that the filmmakers are smart to do things in this way because it's going to engage the more modern audience.
Okay.
I would also like to point out a couple more things before we get into the spoiler section. I think that this is a prime opportunity for us to look at franchises and how successful franchises have been with regards to action films. The most popular of which, outside of the Fast and the Furious, which is going on for like 20 years, the most popular, which that would be the John Wick films. Now, Keanu Reeves has always been a very silent, a very quiet, soft-spoken actor in the roles that he's played due to his nature. But when he was cast as John Wick in those films, I've seen all three of them. I own all three of them. And I can't wait for the next one. It's his demeanor. It's him. He becomes the man that you wish you were if you were going to be that type of person. And I'm saying all this to say that when it comes to franchises, a lot of the directors and filmmakers are looking to making franchises that are at least trilogies, but the audience demand is pushing for that fourth, fifth, sixth film. As you can see with the Fast and the Furious films. Not everyone's a fan, but I mean, they keep cranking those things out. They keep having the spinoffs, and there's a good reason for that. And I think with this particular film, we would be remiss if we did not mention the fact that there is a sequel that's being planned. So the producer and screenwriter for Extraction, Joe Russo, has stated that there will be an Extraction 2. He promised that the sequel will bring to bear a broad worldview to the franchise. Now, we've mentioned before that this is an American-made film, but it's not an American film, and this does not take place in the USA. This is more international. I think that with this franchise, along with a lot of the other franchises, even the Fast and Furious films, they did not stay in the United States. They started moving across the world. I think this adds a flavor to these films that is going to attract an audience that's more international, and it's also going to be more of a spectacle for the U.S. audience to see somewhere else. And the Russo brothers also said that there are plans for Hemsworth to return as the lead actor in the film, and Hargrave to return for the Extraction, whether it be a sequel or a prequel.
Do you know how recent this announcement was? I guess we should have pinned that down a bit, but I'm curious if this was the plan off the bat, or if they waited for some reaction to the movie and then decided, oh, there's an interest, we should go forward with this.
Well, this was these were released from a news standpoint relatively late, as of late. So within the past, I'd say 10 days or a week. So I think that there's always going to be, we think this is a good product, and the type of product that it is, we could potentially make sequels, but we do have to wait and see how it's going to fare before we get too far ahead of ourselves.
So we can take this to mean that initial response is pretty darn good.
Yes. It's very good for this particular film. For If you're looking at IMDb, 6.8, which is solid. And I'm not sure what it is on Rotten Tomatoes. It's 68% on Rotten Tomatoes, which makes it fresh. I mean, it's
Sure.
not, so it's not blowing it up, but at the same time, it's earned a sequel. Let's put it that way. It's earned a sequel with regards to the reaction to the viewers. And I think that what the Russos are saying with the planned sequel or prequel is that, yeah, we thought about this. We wanted to see how you guys reacted, and now we're moving forward. Just to bring into play another recent film, Bloodshot, which I just watched this past weekend for the first time. I was interested in this film. I was excited about this film, but it did not make the receipts. It did not get the praise. And as you can see, no one's talking about a sequel. So definitely You're going to be looking at the audience response. And I think that they were, the Russo brothers here were looking, hey, this is going to be a theatrical release, but now because of the COVID-19, it's on Netflix. How's this going to fare? And I think that it kind of helped the film in a lot of ways.
That was gonna be my next question to you. This is strictly opinion, but my feeling is that coming out directly to Netflix actually helped it rather than going to the movie theater. In a world where COVID-19 didn't exist, we're into the summer with Black Widow and Wonder Woman and some of these other tentpole films. How does a movie like Extraction do? Where do you place it? How do you get people to come to it? It seemed to me that dropping it on the Netflix, you had Chris Hemsworth as enough of a draw for someone who's got hours to kill to go, oh, I guess I got a couple hours. Let's give it a try.
Right.
I think that may have helped it.
Right.
What do you think?
I don't think that this particular film would have fared as well as at the box office if it's going up against a Black Widow or any of those other films. I think those films would just have eaten this alive. So having released it on Netflix, I think has helped the film, and the whole situation of people being home and put, on stay-at-home order has helped it. So I think that timing and situation have all helped this film to do even better than it may have fared as if it were released at the box office. But I want to go into another thing that Joe Russo, or the Russo brothers, said. He stated, we're not committing yet to whether the story goes forward or backward in time. They're waiting because the first priority is to work out the story and have further writing of the script finished before they decide whether or not this is going to be a prequel or a sequel. And those decisions are well thought out, because I think that right now we can go and say that if you have not seen the film, go see it before you watch this past this point, because we're going to start getting into the spoiler territories. Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Yeah,
Spoilers.
I think it's time. Yeah, I agree.
So this is leading this statement by the Russos in wanting to wait and not knowing whether or not it's a sequel or prequel leads directly into the spoilers. So again, if you have not seen the film, go see it, come back, and then you can finish resuming to watch this video.
Should we just give our ratings really quick before we get into spoilers?
Yes, we can give our ratings. Myself, on a scale of, I'd say, 1 to 5 towers, I'm going to give this a solid 4 towers.
Okay.
I think that it does well. I think that the timing and everything, like I said, about the film, the acting, the writing, the directing, the script, cinematography, all the things that you mentioned about the action scene beats, all that earns this film a 4 towers from me. What do you say?
I'm going 3.5. I thought it was a bit long for the story. I thought that I kept waiting for one more plot twist. I think maybe there should have been maybe one more shoe to drop in there someplace, and it didn't quite get there. But my goodness, it's really solid. I just I didn't think it didn't quite get to 4 for me, but 3.5 is definitely a solid recommendation. And of the two of us, you're better versed in the genre than I am, so people should take that into account as well.
Okay. All right. So, spoilers. Let's say that the reason why the Russo brothers don't know whether or not this is going to be a sequel or prequel is because it is implied that the character of Tyler Rake perishes at the end of this film. And it's implied because you see they've got the boy out, but he's got to create the diversion and hold off everyone on a bridge until they can get the boy in the helicopter and they can take off. Well, he's already, as RJ said, beaten up. I mean, most people would have just laid out in the street and died, but he kept on. But there are only so many times you can get shot as a human without superhuman godlike powers. And so, yeah, he succumbed to that. He was like, all right, this is enough. I'm getting up here on the bridge. And he started having flashbacks of his son, of course, the obligatory, life, moments. And then he does a header off the bridge into the water below. You see his body kind of float there for a while, and then they cut away, and then that's pretty much it. You're left to be in all your feelings, and you can assume that, as most humans, going through all that punishment and then falling off a bridge, you pretty dead. But the body was never claimed. So as in these movies, if you don't see the body in a casket, and even when you do see it in the casket, you got to take it for what it is with a grain of salt, because it is a film. So he could possibly come back. Maybe he was able to survive that, and he was half dead for a year. I mean, they did it with Mark for Death with Steven Seagal many years ago.
Yeah, and they tease as much because we jump ahead in time.
Mm-hmm.
We see the boy come out of the pool, and then there's someone there, and they don't quite show you who it is.
Mm-hmm.
Cut to the credits.
Right, yeah. Right. And, some time has passed, so we don't know. I think that, personally, I would eventually like to see a prequel, but not as the next movie. Mm. I kind of want to see where it goes in the forward progression. I kind of want to see if the boy is involved, if he's able to move away from, his hereditary profession. So, as with most situations, you have a father who's a criminal, and then eventually the son takes over the family business. But he didn't seem, from his character, like he wanted to have much in the way of any parts of all of that. And it would be interesting to see, 2 years from now, when he's matured and time has passed, where he stands on that. Is he moving away from his father's dirty dealings and becoming his own person? Is Rake's character still alive, and is he mentoring him, and where he's going? It would be interesting to see. That's not to say that I wouldn't want to see a prequel, but that's where I'm at. What about you?
Well, I think we need to go back to early in the film. We do establish Chris Hemsworth seems to have some Aquaman powers. We see him dive into the water and kind of sit at the bottom for an extremely long time, and I don't think that's in there just to be in there. I think that they were kind of planting the idea that, hey, this guy, if he needed to, could float away and maybe survive. I think they also, I think that, and I couldn't say it before the spoiler point, but I thought the ambiguity at the end that was one of the reasons it did lose a half point. I wish they had committed one way or the other. Is it him or isn't it him? Did he? I mean, I'm almost thinking he got him out of the country and maybe the kid actually has a chance at a normal life. We don't know any of that. You kind of have to fill that in your head, and you're not going to know. Like you say, let's have a sequel. I would like to go forward with the story for the same reasons that you've put out there. I just wish that as many chances as I think the movie took, I thought the very end it was kind of like, come on, throw me a bit more of a bone. Come on, give me something to establish what your thinking is. I thought that was kind of a safe bet. That's okay. It was still a great movie. And now that we know that it's had some success, they're probably thinking exactly that way. I also want to talk about the lady assistant who helps Chris Hemsworth's character throughout and gets her moment in the sun. I've heard some talk that they might do something with her, either as giving her a more prominent role in a next film or giving her own film. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a thought on that, and I'll address that. But I also wanted to chime in with what you said prior to that. They were playing it safe, and I think that although I understand exactly where you're coming from about wanting to have had more of a one way or the other thing, I think playing it safe with regards to this film is a smart move, considering it would have been to the theater and it would have possibly been going up against Black Widow and other big blockbuster films like that, and as we stated before, might not have fared so well. So that was an out. You didn't know, so maybe that if we didn't get the ratings to get a sequel, then we're good. But here's the thing with that: we also don't know if that particular scene was added when they realized that it's not going to be put into the theater, and we're wanting to see how this is going to do with the Netflix audience. I hadn't read anywhere where this was in the can prior to or after, so this may have been them playing it safe either way. It could have been where they had committed if they'd have thought, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. But I understand why they did it, is what I'm basically saying. And I agree. Yeah. I think that it could have been a little bit more clear cut, but at the same time, the ambiguity is actually making me a little bit more anxious about wanting, in a good way, to see whether or not it's a sequel or prequel. So, but I just wanted to put that in there. And as far as the other actress, the person who basically was like helping him with his assignment, the
dude in the van.
She, I think, was an interesting character, and she was more or less like an M for, like, with the James Bond films. She's somebody from behind the scenes who is helping him navigate, but also putting those assignments out there, putting everything into perspective. So seeing something kind of spin off from her, or maybe having other characters within the Extraction universe, might be interesting. There's a lot of different ways that they can go, and with the scope of film and television changing as much as it has, and our viewing habits and the production of these things, whether it be a film or television series, is something that has lent itself to these types of possibilities, whereas before we didn't have it. One prime example is the Disney Plus, where you're going to have the MCU characters in their own television series, but these tie directly into the films. This is something that would have been unheard of, 10 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. And now is something that a lot of people are looking at with regards to what they're doing. And so I would love to see where they would go with something like that. I think that her character was just interesting enough and well portrayed enough to where something like that could definitely be worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. So, straight to streaming, Netflix specific. I think if you take out the Oscar bait type films that came out last November or so, probably one of the strongest Netflix films I've seen. I've been following the sci-fi stuff specifically for the most part. It's let me down. This one was very solid. Now, of course, it was originally made for the theater, but still, it is a Netflix release. I thought it was more ambitious than the Punisher series, which I love the Punisher series. As violent as this was, I thought the Punisher was more violent in some ways, in terms of a
lot more gore, I think.
The brutality of what the character goes through.
Yes.
So I think this is an exciting time for streaming services, and this is a really, really solid entry for comparable material out there. Now, I know you've seen more of the action films that have gone straight to Netflix, and from what I've seen, for the most part, you don't have a high opinion of a lot of it. But you want to speak to that a bit more?
Yeah. Most of them are okay. Some of them are just they just downright suck. But this one is one. This one is one of the exceptions. I would definitely say, as far as the streaming service is concerned, like what I was talking about before, the scope of how we view films and how we watch television has changed. Everyone has a streaming service now. So you've got Disney Plus, you've got DC Universe, you've got Apple TV, you've got Netflix, Hulu, you've got BT has got their own thing. I mean, everyone has their own streaming network service, and they're all competing, Prime Video for the Amazon, and someone else just came out with one. Was it Google or something? Google TV? Apple's, yeah, I mentioned them, but Google, it's another one. It's a newer one even than that. I think it's Google TV or something. It's crazy. So everyone's got some kind of streaming service now, and now they're all fighting for the viewers' dollars and attention. And I actually think this is a good thing, because it's driving them to produce better quality films and television shows in the hopes of trying to win over the audiences, which is a plus for the viewers. And I have to say, having access to Apple TV and some of the others, there is some great programming on these streaming services. Now, I'm not saying everything that they put on there is a hit. Some of it's like a clear miss, but they've got each one of them have winners. Let's put it that way. You're not going to find a streaming service that doesn't have something that is at least good, because they're out there and they're competing for their viewers, and that's a win for the viewers. in my
what
opinion.
this reminds me of the blockbuster video age, when there were those direct-to-video films, and that was the opportunity for the more experimental kind of out there stuff, low budget stuff. Except I think this is so much better. This gives people an opportunity to work on a probably relatively larger budget, better looking movies. If you get someone with some skills, you can put together some pretty impressive stuff, even for something that went straight to streaming.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's an exciting time for filmmakers. You don't have to be on a big budget Marvel film or part of Lucasfilm or something to get some exposure and get your talent out there.
Right. And it's a lot of opportunities for creators, whether they be the people who've written a novel that these films or television shows are based on, to the screenwriters, to the actors, to the networks, to the viewers. It just opens up doors that weren't open before, and it's changed the scope of how we do things and how things are done. And I am actually a big fan of this, and I think that this is something that is the right direction that filmmaking and television should be moving in. So I think we're gonna start wrapping this up here. I think we have given everything and said about everything that we need to say about this film.
Yeah.
And I recommend it. I hope that our viewers will go out here and check it out. And I hope that they will please put in the comments what they thought. Did you like it? If you didn't like it, why you liked it, why you didn't like it. Are you excited for a sequel or a prequel? Will you be following the director from now and into his other projects, and the screenwriters, the Russo brothers? And we want to hear from you guys. So make sure that you comment in the comments on this video. You got anything you want to say, RJ?
No, just that, the director took advantage of his opportunity, even though he thought he was filming for the movie theaters. And I think that Netflix probably worked out better. And this is a guy I think we're all going to be kind of watching in the future. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next, whether they continue with
We're having some technical difficulties here. We're going to be cutting out this section. Looks like we may have lost RJ.
You back? Looks like you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. You like froze, and then it just went crazy, and I don't know what's going on. So hopefully it continued to record.
Yeah, you just. Okay.
You back?
Yeah, from my side, you're coming and going. So yeah, I think we're just having bad bandwidth all around.
Yeah. Okay.
So what was the last thing that was caught before it glitched? Do you know?
Right when you started talking, from the time that I stopped, I'm not sure exactly what you were going on to. I had just finished saying that I think that the industry is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think all I said was the director took full advantage of. All right, so let me just pause a moment. Maybe you can clip this in.
Yeah, I can.
But the exciting thing for me is the director was aiming for the movie theater. He didn't get there, but I think he took full advantage of the opportunity that he had, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming next, whether we stay in this franchise or he moves on to other things, he'll definitely be a name to be watching. So that's exciting. It's always nice to see a success story like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to quite a few more success stories and potentials being fulfilled as we move forward with things. I want to take this time to thank our viewers and listeners and let you know that you are valuable to us. We appreciate you tuning in. And please know that you've got some more stuff to look forward to coming down the line from us. We are excited about, and you will be hearing about coming soon. So thank you for tuning in. You can check us out on Facebook just by typing the Two Towers Talk Show. You can also reach me via my website at johnfallenauthor.com. And where can they reach you, RJ?
R.J.Sullivanfiction.com.
And basically, again, thank you. And until next time, stay safe. Goodbye.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.